So again, welcome everybody. This is the section on postgraduate legal education. I'm John Thornton. I am this year's section chair. Our section's theme for this year is legal education programs for non-licensed professionals. And we have a sort of two-part theme. We are addressing that topic first today in our webinar, and then in our section's program at the annual meeting in San Diego on January 6th. So today is part one of our topic. It's called Starting MSL and Similar Programs. And I just want everybody to know for ground rules for both today's meeting and for the main session at the annual meeting, we're using the term MSL collectively to refer to all of the various types of master's programs that law schools are offering these days for professionals who have no prior legal training. Our presenters today are Anne Marlenga of the University of Southern California's Gould School of Law and Leslie Oster of Northwestern University's Pritzker School of Law. Both USC and Northwestern have a varied offering of MSL type programs, both in person and online. And our two presenters have been deeply involved with their programs since their creation. So we thought that they would be really excellent speakers. Today's webinar will focus more on these schools' decisions to set up and run these sorts of master's programs in the first place. Their initial thinking process, the planning process, getting them up and running, etc. In the second part of our program at the annual meeting in San Diego in January, both Anne and Leslie will return, and they will discuss the nuts and bolts of how to run these sorts of programs, both in person and online. The program will also, in its second part in San Diego, it'll look a little further down the road at other training opportunities for law schools beyond just this type of master's programs. In particular, we'll be looking at how non-lawyers may be able, with proper training, to provide certain limited legal services without being supervised by licensed attorneys, in a way similar to how nurse practitioners are able to provide certain medical services without doctors being present. So for that second part of our program in January, Suzanne Porter of the Arizona Supreme Court will present their innovative regime in Arizona, because the state has already made it legal for non-trained lawyers with certain appropriate training that the state deems appropriate to provide legal services. And then Daniel Rodriguez of Northwestern, who has expertise in legal AI, will address how law schools could train non-lawyers, whether it's in some sort of MSL program or perhaps in a certificate type program, to provide certain legal limited services, potentially involving the use of AI, whether that means that they will be able to, through the use of AI, it will enable them to help clients or potential clients, or whether that can even be involved in their training as well. So we hope that you can attend both of our sessions. You're obviously here now, and thank you for attending. And we also hope that you can make it to San Diego. Our meeting in San Diego is Friday, January 6th. I know it's an unfortunate date, but it is what it is. And it will be at 8 a.m. Oh, you're welcome to bring coffee, but we really hope you come. Okay, with that said, let's get rolling today. I've done enough talking for the day. Let's get up to our two speakers. Anne Marlenga will speak first, and then our format for today, Anne will present, then Leslie will present, and when they're both finished, I'll ask them a few questions, and then we want to open up the floor for questions from all of you who are attending today. Feel free, as they occur to you, to type questions in the chat. One of our section officers, Ashley Sim of USC, will be monitoring the chat, and she will be able to help with the questions in the second half. And you can also ask questions by using that raised hand feature as well. Okay, with that, let's get started. Anne, you're up.
Sounds good. Thanks, John. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I brought some visual aids, so I'm going to share some slides here. I thought that to begin the conversation, it might help to give some context on where I'm coming from. So I thought I'd give you just a very brief history on our quote unquote non-lawyer programs, for lack of a better way to describe them. So at USC Gould, our graduate and international programs department manages a variety of graduate programs, basically everything non-JD. We began with a traditional international on-campus LLM program in 2002. And then about 10 years after that, we started an online program, mostly due to the direction by our university. Central University, our president wanted all graduate programs, graduate departments, that is, to offer at least one graduate program in an online format. And at that time, really our options included mostly non-JD offerings. So what we thought we would do is launch our LLM online. So we did that in fall of 2014. But pretty quickly thereafter, we discovered, both based on market research as well as just hearing from prospective students, that there was interest in an MSL type program. Ours is called a Master of Studies in Law, which, as John mentioned, there is a variety of names for these types of programs. But we launched first online in 2016. We utilized the classes that we were already offering online for our online LLM program. So we already had a set of classes. We kind of just had to develop the program around what we were offering for LLM students. Pretty shortly after we launched that online MSL program, we received a lot of interest from prospective students in an on-campus version. So we launched that a couple of years later. And throughout that time with our online programs, we slowly started offering certificate programs, which are specializations that are offered either within one of the degree programs, within the LLM or the MSL. So students just select their elective classes around the certificate requirements, or students can take them on a standalone basis as a graduate certificate. That's more rare, but an option. Either for a JD grad who wants a little bit more expertise in one of those areas. Entertainment law is our most popular, probably not surprisingly, based on our location, but non-JD grads apply for those certificates as well. I just noted here, especially because my colleague Ashley is with us today and manages many of our other LLM programs not mentioned here for the basis of this conversation. I thought maybe that timeline would help, just to kind of see our rollout. Next, I thought I would just talk about the initial considerations that we had when launching these various non-JD programs, in hopes that maybe it's, topics or points that you might think about. So I think a lot of what is to be considered when developing an MSL or other type of non-JD program really depends on operating availability. So in our case, our building is not large. So for us, starting online really made the most sense. I can certainly talk about our on-campus program later, but it is much smaller, and we utilize a lot of space outside of our law school. We have slowly been able to kind of acquire some space in the law school building, but for us, space has always been an issue. I think based on your faculty and administrative appetite for developing new programs, especially in a new format, can be worth considering. Possibly engaging in a new partner-provider relationship, which we can talk about later as well, are some of the considerations we really had to think about when starting a new program, and for us, a new format as well. Depending on what's already available in terms of subject matter focus, what your faculty are already teaching can make a big difference in developing new classes, new programs. I mentioned here the degree name. There are, as John mentioned, many different names for what our school calls a Master of Studies in Law. So there's a Master of Science in Law, a Master of Legal Studies, Master of Jurisprudence. There are many, many names, which, it is an issue in and of itself when it comes to both attracting prospective students and employers, and is forever a discussion in the MSL community. I see some familiar names and faces here from our conferences on the legal masters program conferences. We all have different types of names. So deciding on a name is important in order to, make sure the market research and popularity aligns, as well as for us, we were also trying to avoid competition within our own university. So trying not to sound too similar to other similar degrees offered within other schools outside the law school. In terms of market research, it can be helpful, either done internally or externally by a vendor. But, I think it doesn't always tell the whole story. So I think, these other factors, really the appetite of your faculty, the expertise of that faculty in certain areas, if you're planning to launch completely new specializations, the existing administrative support, and the ability to hire more staff, really should be factored in, not just the market research. So those were kind of some of the initial considerations we had. When we got to really thinking about formats in terms of online, in-person, hybrid, some of the same factors were in play. So again, that building space was a big consideration for us. We can enroll many more students online than we could ever fit in our building, or even in different buildings on our campus, which our students don't have a great appetite for. Our faculty even less so. There's less kind of tech support in the other buildings. We've had a lot of issues there. So online has been easier for us due to physical space constraints. Again, that administrative support for online teaching and advising, we've had to hire new advisors who manage these programs and who are able to work with online students who have different needs. We did start our programs with the utilization of an outside vendor. So that was a huge part of how we started our online LLM, and then we added in that online MSL. We have since moved away, and we are now in-house, but as you could see from that first slide, we started several years ago. So we started with that outside vendor. There are many, many out there, and they really were able to give us some expertise as we initially set up. So the technical support is something to be considered, whether that's available in-house or you have to contract that out, whether it's a lot of the tech services or maybe just a help desk. We had to explore all of those options. So it's a lot for online. We found eventually that we could attract a wider audience by offering multiple formats. So students can really select which one works best for them. We've also been able to market these programs together. So it's more that we're marketing the MSL program as a whole. It's the same degree. Choose your own adventure. Would you like to be online? Would you like to be on campus? We have found that the two programs enroll different types of students. So our on-campus students, although the classes are offered in the evening, they still tend to be younger, more junior in their careers. Our online students tend to be work more part-time. So, 1 or 2 classes per semester sometimes. They often have work and family obligations. So that tends to be a little bit different in terms of advising the students. We do, online offer the program nationwide. We do have some issues with state authorizations. We are required to be authorized to offer the program in different states individually. So there are a few states where we have to really monitor whether students can enroll in the program or not. which is another administrative can of worms. But because we're able to market across the country, the online program quite obviously attracts a wider audience, which is nice. One thing that I think did surprise us though early on is that we were kind of bringing these 2-degree programs, to the world. But it turns out about 75 or 80% of our students are based in Southern California. It's not what we expected, but I think in the end, it probably makes sense. It's, we have the name recognition in our backyard. And I think our program has attracted students who don't have the time to commute to campus. So, they want to be connected locally, but they just haven't been able to commit to coming to near downtown LA. So that was interesting for us. We still do see diversity across the country, but a large percentage of our students are based in Southern California. We have not explored hybrid quite yet, but I definitely think that's what's next for us. And hybrid discussions can involve a variety of aspects. A hybrid program, to us, we believe will include students who choose some online classes and some in-person classes. I don't foresee that we will offer hybrid classes where there are some students in person and some students online, because we already have the infrastructure to offer both formats. I think rather we will offer students the opportunity to enroll in both types. But there are different ways to do hybrid. So I think it's worth considering that. For us, it has been really logistically difficult so far. Our different programs have different calendars, different financial aid, eligibility, a lot of differences in their aspects, but students are requesting hybrid opportunities. So I think that, we need to listen to that, and we'll probably be headed that way next. But hence the question mark on my slide. And then finally, I just thought I would offer some sort of general recommendations. Maybe these are more like lessons learned. Considering the time and cost is really important. I think both will be longer and larger than you expect. It took us years to set up our program. And even within the program, it takes us months to create each online class. So specifically online, our classes are all built in advance, which is really one of the best practices for online education. Again, we started with a vendor who helped us with course development. So we hired our faculty. Some were existing faculty, some we hired. They worked with course developers, instructional designers from our partner to develop these courses. And all of our courses went through a 30-week cycle. So it takes a while to develop each individual course. And so beyond just setting up the program through your university, getting accreditation, all of that, each course takes quite a while. Same goes for cost. We had to hire administrative staff. Marketing was different. All sorts of kind of investments that you might not expect would be a part of these programs. I guess I mentioned kind of the location of students, but one thing that we did find that was helpful too is to replicate some of the classes and programs we offered on campus online. So, again, we started with our online LLM because we already offered a residential LLM, which was helpful. But when we started our MSL, we were starting fresh online, and then it was helpful to be able to use that experience when we launched the on-campus version of that. When we developed many of our online classes, we used the syllabi from JD classes or our existing on-campus LLM classes to kind of assist with the faculty developing those courses. Some of our courses online were brand new and not offered in person at all. So that was a little bit different, but borrowing from what already exists can be helpful. However, with the huge caveat that the experience is completely different across these formats. I already mentioned a little bit about what we've seen in the enrollment of our students, but the experience differs quite a bit as well. I could give a million examples, but one of which that comes to mind is that our online students tend to want a lot more engagement because they're not able to see faculty before or after class. They're not able to pop into your office to have a 5-minute chat. So they really like to have emails answered quickly. They really want a lot of interaction when they're in live sessions. Each of our online courses does require a live Zoom class session each week, and they want that engagement. Because they're lacking that a little bit in the on-campus experience, they definitely want to make up for that online. So that was one thing, you know, we needed to be prepared to offer in terms of advising, in terms of integrating students, which I have here as well. We've offered some events online, and we've also invited online students to everything we can think of, whether it's on campus, whether we have a staff member traveling to a conference and they can, you know, take a few students out to lunch, or those kinds of things. Have been really important to try to integrate those online students into the wider law school, into the wider campus. It has been helpful for us to have the same team of advisors who are supporting both our MSL students online and on campus. Again, kind of those cross-reference points. It has made sense for us just to kind of share those advisors across programs. And because we manage all non-JD programs, we do try to integrate as much as we can across programs, both marketing, events, all sorts of resources. So that has been helpful for us. For our programs online and our MSL program on campus actually as well, we employ mostly adjunct faculty. One good part is that you can hire faculty from across the country, so that has been helpful. But we have found that our classes online involve a lot more day-to-day support from faculty. So we have been able to hire some JD TAs to assist with a little bit of communication from students who, again, want to be really connected. So adjunct faculty support is really important in these online programs specifically, but also in the MSL, just in terms of supporting them in teaching a different type of student. And then again, consider outsourcing opportunities across campus or via private vendors if that's available or of interest to your law school. So I'm going to wrap it up there because I've reached my time, and I look forward to any questions after we hear from Leslie, and I'll turn it over to you, Leslie.
Thanks so much, Anne. I always learn a lot listening to your presentations. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit focusing in on the why, and just to situate the same way that Anne did. We started our MSL, Master of Science in Law program in 2014. We had both a full-time and a part-time format. So our first graduates were in the spring of 2015. We started an online program about 4 years later. So we started residential and we added online. It's kind of the reverse of what Anne described. So we added our online program in 2018. We've now graduated over 500 people from the program, and we currently have close to 200 students at various stages of the program. So that's a little bit of situational information. We don't have certificates, but it's a good thing that for us that we've been thinking about. So we don't have certificates. We do have a fair amount of flexibility. Online students can take residential classes, in fact, are required to come to campus to take at least 2 classes residentially. Residential students can take online classes as well. And they're the same faculty. They're different format, different modality, but same classes, same degree. So there's a lot of fluidity between our residential and our online. With that bit of information, I want to talk a little bit about why would schools consider developing a master's program in law. And I guess the most obvious answer is as a revenue source. So I think, and related to that idea of a revenue source, also to use unused resources. So I think the first influx of master's programs came about because of the decline in JD applications. So sort of unused seats in classes and, you know, less need for as much on the JD side. And I think a number of schools were thinking, well, how are we going to deal with our extra resources or find additional sources of revenue, either because we deliberately want to keep the size of the JD class down or because applications have declined. So I do think that the money side, the revenue side, was probably a big impetus for a lot of schools to start thinking about what else they could do. And that led to thoughts about master's degrees. I will say, though, that there are other reasons, and some of them are good reasons to think about having a master's program. Again, this may seem like very general, but some of us might think that it is a good idea for more people in our professions to have understanding of law and regulation. That's an idea. Maybe some people think the opposite, but I think a lot of us might agree that better legal understanding would help grease the wheels in a lot of, business and policy situations. So again, a general point, but something that I think, some others people might agree with, and that might be part of the why for considering a program like this. Another thing that you might think about at this point in time is, gee, a number of schools have these programs and they're pretty good schools. So we want our school to have one to sort of keep up and to be in the game with those programs. It wasn't something that we thought of at the beginning, but I think now it's a serious inquiry as to whether this is part of the mission of any particular law school and something that a law school might do also to keep up with what other law schools are doing. I don't know the numbers exactly, and I'm not sure if Ann does, but there's got to be more than 20 programs like this, I would think, among American law schools, and maybe more. I should know the numbers, but I don't. So it's a thing now. And while at the very beginning, when we created the program, I'd sort of panic whenever another program would come online or would come into existence, because I'd think, oh, we need those students. I no longer feel that way. And I sort of feel, confidently, the more the merrier, right? The more schools that have these programs, the more legitimacy they have. The more you create a market by having the supply of programs. So that's another thing that I think goes into the decision to think about whether to have a master's degree program in a law school. One of the reasons that we started the program at Northwestern is because we had a committee that was looking at STEM related issues, like understanding the way of the world and how important technology had become, and knowing that the percentage of STEM professionals in JD programs was pretty low. We were looking at what can we do to sort of educate this population of people who might not find their way into JD programs. And so for us, it was sort of a specialized interest, a focus on trying to create a program that would be beneficial and interesting for STEM professionals. So some kind of specialized knowledge is also a reason to think about creating a program like this. If your school has a focus on intellectual property or environmental law, and again, connected to the first thing I mentioned, which is sort of sharing legal knowledge with people who are not necessarily interested in being lawyers. So that's another thing to think about. I guess sort of putting all of these different factors together, I would say, I don't think the revenue stream is enough, because as Ann said, there's lots of costs to creating a degree like this, and you have to be all in to do it well. It's not just going to take off on its own. So you need more than just the revenue stream idea as a justification for investing, resources in creating a program like that. And again, echoing something that Ann said, believe us, you can't do this without investing resources. Your career services office, they don't specialize in finding jobs for people who have a master's degree in law, right? I mean, I could name every office in your school and sort of say why this program might not fit with what they already do. But there's a lot of issues in creating a program with has a different population of students in it from the JD population. There are a lot of other decisions that you have to make and want to make at the beginning of thinking about this program. And I obviously can't run through all of them right here, but I'm going to mention a few that you probably want to think about. And these are inherent in what Ann already talked about. You have to decide if you're going to be full-time or part-time. And as Ann said, those formats appeal to different populations. Well, what Ann said was that the modality, whether you're online or in person, appeals to different populations. Same thing with full-time, part-time. Part-time students are usually people working full-time with families. Full-time students tend to be people like maybe more soon out of undergrad. They can travel to your school, wherever it is, to spend a year if they're doing a full-time. Those decisions are important, and they also lead to other decisions, right? If you're appealing to full-time working professionals, it's got to be part-time. It's really got to be online, I would say at this point. The kinds of services you provide are different. If you're appealing to younger students who may be going to come to your campus and do a full-time program, you got to look at other issues like career services. Most of these people have not been full-time working professionals, and they need totally different kind of guidance. You also need to look at how will those students fit into your school's environment, your school's culture. You don't want to create a program and bring in a bunch of people who are just going to feel like second-class citizens, right? So how are you going to integrate students if you're looking at doing a residential program or a full-time program? And you're going to run into a lot of attitude, right? Because so many people have just feel like the law schools are for JDs and everybody else is riffraff. Well, that's not going to lead to a very successful program. You don't want to bring in students who are going to feel like riffraff. And so that's another thing you need to think about, like what is the appetite for the program within your school, within your student body, within your faculty. Ann mentioned working with online program managers who can help you develop a program, a whole set of issues involved with that. They sound great because they make a lot of the upfront investment. So your school is going to be awesome. We don't have to sink this money into the program. Don't be fooled. They get that money back, right? And you're going to sign an agreement with them. They're going to have control over some of the things that you normally would have control over. So the decision to work with an online program manager is a huge decision, and one that's complicated. What kind of curriculum are you going to have? You're going to create classes especially for these students, or are you going to try to repurpose other classes? Obviously, if you have a residential program, having these students sit in JD classes seems to make economic sense. But is that going to work? Are the classes going to be changed for them? Are the JD students going to resent them? These are really important design issues that you have to think through. You can't be all things to all people. You can't just say, we're going to start a master's program and whoever comes and we will deal with it. We'll put them in classes, or we'll create classes, or we'll have adjuncts, or we'll have our core faculty. Or all of this stuff needs to come out in the design of the program, or most of it does. There are some other administrative hurdles that you definitely have to think about. The ABA, not a huge hurdle, but definitely something you have to deal with. Your own school or department, what kind of process do they have for creating a new degree? University rules, regulations, and procedures. Sometimes you have to get tuition set by your board of trustees for the university or by some committee on campus. Those are issues to think about. Regional accreditors are gonna sometimes play a role, depends on, who your accreditor is. Anne mentioned that states sometimes have regulations, countries sometimes have regulations. We also mistakenly thought, oh, we'll start this online program, we will get students from all over the world. Well, online degrees in the US are not always recognized by different countries. And so you really need to do a lot of research to understand that and to create a program that might attract students from other countries. So I'm going to stop there. Believe me, I could go on for a long time, but I know there's some good questions and I'm happy to answer anything. I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you, Ann and Leslie. I'm gonna just ask a couple of questions, and then I want to give all of our attendees the opportunity to ask some questions. So I'm just gonna pop in with a few quick ones. I noticed both of you mentioning the dates 2014 for your programs and the timelines. So you've both been running these programs for quite a while now, and certainly long before the pandemic. But I was just, and I know that both of you have both, as you described, have both online and in-person courses. So the pandemic may not have changed things all that much, given that you were already online. But I was just wondering, when the pandemic came along, did you need to make fairly major adjustments, or what kind of adjustments did you need to make? And then now that we're on the other end of it, we're sort of, well, hopefully coming out of the pandemic into something that's just more, whatever we want to call it, endemic. Are some of those changes caused by the pandemic? How long lasting are they? Are you going to keep them as on a sort of ongoing basis, or are things going to go back to whatever you consider normal, or how long lived are those changes? Anne, let's start with you.
Sure. So in the early part of the pandemic, it was interesting because our online programs had kind of just, we were just silent in the background at the law school, and suddenly our expertise was needed by everyone in the law school. So it was a very interesting and busy first probably 6 months as our team really helped the faculty who had only taught on campus for JD and LLM programs to move their classes remotely. We started calling those classes remote classes, and our online program our online classes, because those were built to be online. We have our own separate platform. It wasn't just, an in-person class put on Zoom. So we had to support our faculty quite a bit in that early stage. And then I think what we ended up finding out throughout, and I mentioned this briefly, was that students ended up wanting a little bit more online experience. I think a lot of students didn't hate being online 100%. Many of our on-campus students didn't want to be all online, but perhaps 1 or 2 classes. And so I think students realized that the convenience of having a little bit of online education would be nice. And so we are now trying to explore what that means in terms of offering hybrid programs. I just was I don't know if any of you were at the conference last week at the University of Denver for online teaching and learning in law schools. But the ABA spoke, and they mentioned that more and more JD programs are trying to be provisionally approved. So even our JD students are interested in a little bit of online education. So I think we, in the initial months, we did a lot to kind of move our residential programs remote. But now I think we're realizing that all students want a tiny bit of online education. So we're trying to figure out what that means for us in the next stage.
Leslie?
I'll just say a couple of things. The pandemic brought virtually no changes to our online program. And like Anne said, one of the big things that happened was we became the MSL program, which was the only program in the law school that had an online program, became really valuable to the school. And our faculty worked with other faculty. We had a learning engineer embedded into our system that everybody wanted a piece of. So yeah, we had a little territorial things there, but we all worked together on that. It did really impact our residential program, because the residential students are tend to be young students who wanted to come for a residential experience. And to be honest, they were crabby the whole year. And even though I think our classes were really good because we had this expertise, we knew how to build classes for the online environment. And even though, as Ann said, these were sort of considered remote classes, they involved a lot more than just putting a camera on a person who's lecturing in a class. I mean, we really tried to design these classes for the online environment during the pandemic, but the residential student didn't care. We've had happy students in every year of our Master of Science and Law program, except that 1 year that we were online the whole year. And I don't know that we can do anything to recapture that. It was just not a good year. They were unhappy, and it wasn't our fault, but we were very happy to come back into the building. But now I know the students have changed, and they don't spend as much time in the building as they used to, and they are more open to well-designed online classes. So that's been, that's created, used to be a lot of the residential students were, I'm not taking any of my classes online. And now they're much more open to it because they see they're actually really good classes. So that's the pandemic.
Okay, well, it's going to be 4:30 before we know it, and we've got a lot of good questions already in the chat. So I'm just going to ask one more question before we turn it over to everybody else's questions. And that's the following. Whatever we think about him, Donald Rumsfeld once made a famous quote years ago about known unknowns and the danger of unknown unknowns, by which he meant that when you're planning something, there are certain problems you can anticipate, the known unknowns, even though you don't know what's going to happen to them. But the real danger he talked about was what he called the unknown unknowns, meaning you just are not able to anticipate something at all. It comes from out of the blue and surprises you. Now, obviously, both of your schools have been doing these MSL programs for a long time, and I'm sure you've planned them well and they're successful. That said, nobody can anticipate everything. I'm sure, at least in the early years of your programs, there must have been something that sort of came upon you out of the blue. So I was wondering if you had any, shall we call them unexpected situations that caught you by surprise? And if so, how did you deal with them? Leslie, let's start with you.
Can I say, like, I should not be the one on the panel because I noticed somebody put in the chat that there are 80 schools that have programs, and I said 20. I was trying to be modest, but even if I had taken away the modesty factor, I might have said 30 or 35, 40, maybe at the highest, but there's 80. Yeah, not really an expert. I've had my head down. When I think of unanticipated challenges, one thing I think about is people's attitude towards the program on both sides. So I did not anticipate some of the resistance or some of the negativity that we might experience with creating this degree. And I mean from all stakeholders. I feel like the JD students, some of them were really crabby about it. I heard once, just in the hallway randomly, I heard a JD student say to another student, I can't believe we have, these MSLs that are eating up all our tuition money. Why do we have to pay tuition so that they can create an MSL program? And it took everything I had to not stop and say, listen, it's the reverse. This is actually a revenue generating program that's helping you. So I was a little surprised by that, or this attitude of JD's like, hey, the law school's for us. So like, who are these people that have been brought into the law school? So some of that negativity was unanticipated, surprised me. Not to say that once we realized it, there weren't ways to deal with it. I think there was negativity from some of the staff. This feeling of like, we're already booked. And now you're bringing in other students who are going to have demands, and they're going to be coming to us. Like, I feel like everywhere I went, people were like, no, we're not, our career services is jammed. We cannot provide career services for MSL. Our admissions office is jammed. We cannot do that. So I think there was a little bit of negativity stemming from people feeling it was going to be increased demands on their time. I think the faculty splits into two camps, and that's why I said there's two sides that were unanticipated. I think there were a lot of faculty that were skeptical, don't believe in the idea of educating non-lawyers, believe that law schools should only be focused on lawyers. Every single faculty member who has gotten involved with the program, and there are a lot of them, almost all of the faculty, changed that attitude right away. But that negativity also affected us at the beginning, affected our own energy and morale, because some people just had a negative feeling about it. At the same time, was unanticipated for me how much some of the faculty would love teaching in this program. I got faculty coming to me all the time saying please use me again next year. I love teaching these MSL students, even some of the ones who were very skeptical at the beginning. These students bring a different energy. They bring a different level of enthusiasm. Some of them don't have the same sense of entitlement that some of our JD students have. And so the shot in the arm, the excitement, the energy that these students have brought to our community at Northwestern is also something that I didn't anticipate. So unanticipated things on both sides.
Okay, Anne?
Yeah, I would echo a lot of that. Two things that came to mind too are I didn't understand or anticipate how much confusion there would be about the MSL degree in general, both among prospective students and employers. So still to this day, even though we've refined our marketing, students apply to the MSL all the time because they think that it's a pathway to the JD. They think that it will help them get into our JD program. Not only can they not transfer units because of ABA rules, but it's not going to help them. Their undergraduate GPA is still their undergraduate GPA. Now, that said, it's not that we're accepting, students with lower scores or GPAs to the MSL, but I think sometimes they think that it's a pathway. And it's not. It's meant to be an alternate, a completely separate path. So we're still counseling students on that, as well as those who think that it's a paralegal certificate program, which it's not. And rightfully so. It is confusing. There's different degree names. It's not well known in among employers. So I understand where the confusion lies, but we've had to do a lot of education, particularly of prospective students. And then I would say one of the things we didn't anticipate with online programs is how easy it is for both students and faculty to disappear off the map. So students will just stop attending class, stop responding, disappear. And it's impossible to get a hold of them when they're across the country and they're not in your building. Sometimes it happens with faculty too, less so, but sometimes they're not responding to students by email and we have to kind of chase them. It's easier to disappear or hide online, which can be a problem. So I think those are two things that we didn't exactly anticipate.
John,
Okay.
can I same thing that Ann said, but I wanted to add one thing. One of the things that we heard a lot when we were thinking about this program is now there's going to be all these people walking around pretending to be lawyers. And, they're going to try to pass themselves off as lawyers. And I actually worried about that, but it has not been an issue. It is very clear. They know they can't take a bar. They're not lawyers. And I once heard one of my graduates say, well, I'm not currently practicing law. And that's the closest that I heard to somebody trying to pass themselves off, but it's exceedingly rare. And so one of these things that could have been a problem, I think has not been a problem.
Okay, my goodness, we've only got about 10 minutes left. But Ashley, I know you volunteered to take over the questions from the chat. And,
yeah, we do have some questions.
Great, let's get started.
Yeah, so for your online MSL program, Anne and Leslie, are they asynchronous, synchronous? Are they both? And then related to that, how do you make sure you have instructors who are teaching effectively online in those kinds of formats?
I can start. Our classes have synchronous and asynchronous components, but they all have some synchronous work. So either our terms are short, they're 7 weeks. Students either meet 3, 4, or 5 times during those 7 weeks. And class attendance is required at the synchronous sessions. Obviously, faculty attendance is required at the synchronous sessions. As to the second question, we have not had that issue because, as I mentioned earlier, we have an embedded learning engineer. She works with all the faculty to create their classes, to house those classes in Canvas, which is our learning management system. And nobody can just put up a class online that hasn't gone through the entire process of course design. So we don't have to worry about that second issue.
Yeah, we're the same in terms of course development. We used to use an outside vendor who had instructional designers. We now have instructional designers in-house that work with our online faculty. We also have a university department that's called the Center for Excellence in Teaching. I'm sure your schools all have something similar, and they do a lot of online kind of coaching and learning resources for faculty, either teaching online or residentially, and those have been very, very helpful. They've ramped up even more, since the pandemic. So we do a lot of support for online adjuncts. It's helpful if they've ever taught anything before, but it doesn't have to necessarily be online or involving course development. And our program is a little similar to Leslie. So our online program involves both asynchronous and synchronous work. So students it's more of a flipped classroom model where students are reading and learning on their own before they come to their live session. And instead of the professor kind of giving them all the information from the week, they've learned it. And it's meant to be more of a discussion section. So each of our online classes has a 1 to 1.5 hour weekly Zoom session. And we limit our classes to 25. That was something else I think that was surprising to us. I think we thought we would just fit hundreds of students in a class online. Turns out it's even harder than fitting that many bodies in a physical classroom. As you've all experienced on Zoom, it's very difficult to manage an interactive conversation with more than 20 to 25 people. So because those sessions are interactive, we cap our classes. We also do a great deal more of weekly assignments and homework than we do on campus. It's one of many of the online best practices to keep students engaged online. And for that reason, we just can't require adjuncts to grade 100 papers every week. So we do keep small class sizes for that reason.
Thank you. Another question we have is, how many administrators run your MSL program? And do you have faculty directors? What is the administrative relationship with other programs that you have, like your LLM and your JD programs?
I can start this one since Ashley is my colleague on my team. So as Ashley knows, we in our graduate and international programs department, I think we have maybe 20-ish staff members now, Ashley, and we manage all things non-JD. For us, it has been helpful to have all non-JD programs managed in one department. It doesn't always make sense for all schools, but for us, that has been helpful. There is about 6 of us that manage online programs, but we also wear multiple hats. So some of us are also working on other programs as well. I think there are none of us that are only focused on our online MSL or our residential MSL. So it's difficult to say like how many, but I would say there's about 6 of us that manage online programs. And again, we also wear other hats. We do have a faculty director whose title is Associate Director for Graduate Curriculum. She manages faculty and curriculum for all non-JD programs, so both on campus and online. And she is the most important resource for our online programs. She counsels and mentors all of our faculty members. So that for us has been really important. I think we did our first year of the online program without her, and it was very difficult. So I think some kind of faculty director, whatever that looks like, is really important for these types of programs.
I'm the faculty director of our program. And so I agree with Ann. I have to agree with Ann that it's very important to have a faculty director. Our MSL is separate from the LLM and the few other non-JD programs in the school. We have a staff of 8. There's me as a director. We have our learning engineer who's focused on curriculum and curriculum development and design. We have 2 student services people who do both academic and career advising. We have 1 sort of operations person also does external relations, and we have a program assistant and an admissions and a recruitment person, and then 1 marketing person. So those are our 8. We're never fully staffed, which is always a problem, and we're largely independent of every other office in the law school. So very different structure from USC.
We have 3 minutes left, so this might be the last question.
Lightning round.
Which is, what are the career paths of your MSL graduates that you can discuss? And do many of them pursue JDs afterwards?
We have, our program focuses on STEM professionals. So we have engineers and scientists, and with a huge range of backgrounds, and they go into a huge range of industries. So the younger students who are like starting out their careers, they might go into finance or venture capital or regulation or consulting. They're taking a technical background, enhancing it with skills involving law, regulation, and business, and they are well suited for a lot of intersectional jobs, program managers, product designers, things like that. A lot of them go off and use their technical background, but in a more intersectional way. The older students who are already full-time professionals, hey, a lot of them are in jobs that they like. They just want to do better or move up. And again, things like pharma and biotech, regulated industries are a big source of employment for our students. So the career stuff really depends on where they are in their career. I don't think I mentioned intellectual property, but some people become IP professionals out of this program. In terms of the people that go to other programs, some go to PhD or MBA programs. Some go on and get a JD. It's not a high percentage. It's probably, it's definitely less than 10%, but a few more each year that decide they really love studying law and want to get a JD. The largest number of our students go on to another program, go on to medical school. So this is a program they'll do during their gap year, and then they are kind of uniquely prepared for their time to study medicine.
I would echo that. Very similar. We have different focus areas, and so our students tend to already work in those areas and often get promotions, which is always wonderful to hear about after they graduate, or they're looking to launch into those areas. So sometimes I saw a question about JD graduates who pursue our certificate programs. They don't pursue our MSL because it's too duplicative of the coursework they've done, but they do sometimes do our certificate programs specifically in areas they didn't take in law school, like entertainment law, where they might be wanting to break into. Same goes for the MSL students who are trying to get into a specific area. So it really ranges in terms of their goals. Very few go on to do JD programs. To be honest, we discourage students from enrolling in the MSL to prep for the JD because they end up having to redo courses. It's a lot of time and money if they're going to end up doing a JD. Some do it anyway because they don't think that that's their path, and then they realize they love law school, and that's fine. But we generally try to discourage it as much as possible.
Okay, we've run out of time. Thank you both so much. Ann Marlenga and Leslie Oster for your presentations, which I think have given everybody a lot of hopefully food for thought for their own law schools and their own programs. I'd also like to thank our section officers, Ashley Sims, Celeste Hammond, and Dana Ragrodsky for their work in planning our sections programming for the year. And Ashley, thank you for running the chat the last 10 minutes or so. And also I'd like to thank Shannon Leonard and Clarissa Ortiz of AALS for their help in running this webinar. As I said at the beginning of our talk, we will be continuing our discussion of this whole area of the law school classes at our annual meeting session, which is going to be early the morning of Friday, January the 6th of 2023 in San Diego, 8 a.m. Grab a cup of coffee and join us. We would love to see you. Thank you, everybody.